Hi everyone. Good Friday to all. Welcome to today's Ethnic Media Services Zoom News Conference. I'm Pilar Barrero, Associate Editor at EMS, and your moderator for today. Today, as Los Angeles is burning yet again, we will speak about what it takes to recover and whether the immigration policies of the current administration will run afoul of those efforts. Could rebuilding LA upend plans to deport millions of immigrants? Or can the opposite happen? Can deporting immigrants make it more difficult to recover from disasters, not just in LA, but elsewhere? Immigrants are the backbone of the American economy and are key to many sectors, including construction and other services relevant to the reconstruction after a disaster. In post-apocalyptic fires in LA, as has happened in every disaster in the United States, immigrants are already hard at work doing the cleanup as the area emerges from its worst disaster ever. Many of these workers are undocumented. An effective recovery will be key, not just for the people who lost their homes, but also for the insurance industry and for the economy at large. In 2005, President George Bush paused employer sanctions after Hurricane Katrina. Today, in 2025, business leaders have already been in touch with the incoming administration, with the current administration, to try to damp some of the impetus behind the mass deportation plans, as many industries are already at a lean point with a dearth of workers. Experts and advocates will discuss whether this effort will go anywhere and what steps are being taken to confront the issue and ensure workers' rights. Our guests today are Nick Theodore, Distinguished Professor of the Department of Urban Planning and Policy at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Pablo Alvarado, Co-Executive Director of NDLON, the National Day Laborers Organizing Network. Anabela Bastida, Director of Membership and Membership Services at the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights of Los Angeles, CHIRLA. And Jenny Murray, President and Chief Executive Officer at the National Immigration Forum. We are honored to have you all here today. We will take questions from reporters immediately after each speaker presents, and we will send videos along with follow-up collateral after today's briefing. So let's begin with Nick Theodore, Distinguished Professor of the Department of Urban Planning and Policy at the University of Illinois in Chicago. Please go ahead, Professor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon from Chicago. For nearly 25 years, I've been conducting research with the National Day Labor Organizing Network around working conditions in various U.S. cities, focused on construction, but also other industries as well. What I wanted to do in my few minutes here today is to highlight some of the trends that we have documented following climate disasters. Over the last decade or so, we have focused on climate disasters in cities such as Houston, New Orleans, South Florida. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we've seen and to discuss a bit what we probably are going to be seeing as Los Angeles begins to rebuild from this disaster. So the first point is that the extent of destruction in urban areas is almost unimaginable. Regardless of the measure that we use, the scale, the cost, the extent of displacement, the personal loss, the time it takes to rebuild. Regardless of any of those measures, when climate disasters hit urban areas, they're quite unique, and those costs, regardless of how we measure them, are extraordinary. Hazards abound. In the case of hurricanes, it's mold and other toxins that both go into the earth and are in the air. Unstable structures, gas leaks, down power line. In the case of Los Angeles, we see exactly the same sort of situation. Not so much mold, but toxic ash with lead and other toxins that are being leached into the earth, going into the groundwater, and also into the air. So these are extremely hazardous situations. And there's great urgency to do this because of the hazards that are around. But unfortunately, this urgency creates opportunities for worker exploitation. The second point is that the disaster recovery zones are areas where labor protections have tended to break down. What we see in all cases of climate disasters is that both employers and workers get drawn into the area because there is so much work to be done. And we're seeing this already in Los Angeles. We in all of the disaster recovery zones that we have studied, we have seen unlicensed contractors, often coming from out of state, coming into the area and picking up a lot of work. Now, those contractors don't come with their own work crews. Instead, they tend to hire locally, and they tend to hire day laborers and other immigrant workers to do this work. So there's a need for them to assemble work crews quite rapidly, and so workers get drawn into these work sites and are employed by these contractors, many of whom are unlicensed and are trying to fly under the radar. I told you a bit about the toxins and the hazards that exist around unstable structures and toxins in the air and water and earth. One of the things that we've documented in all of our studies is that the provision of personal protective equipment, PPE, has always been inadequate. We have situations where workers don't know the conditions that they're walking into. And so it is incumbent on the part of employers to make sure that those workers have the PPE necessary to try to safeguard their health and safety when they're walking into these various hazardous situations. And of course, there's the issue of wage theft. In all of our studies, we have documented very high levels of wage theft. And we know as a whole that even in the best of times, in the construction and landscaping industries, wage theft is very high. But in a disaster recovery zone, in that moment of crisis, the wage theft has been going through the roof. Now, there are a number of reasons for this, because we also know that in a moment of disaster and crisis like this, the capacity of government enforcement agencies is really stretched thin. And again, even in the best of times, when we're talking about the industries where most immigrants work, like construction, when we're talking about the construction industry as a whole, government enforcement of labor standards has never, ever been what it needs to be to safeguard workers. But when there's a climate disaster, those resources are stretched even more thin, and it opens up avenues for exploitation of the workers who are helping rebuild those cities. Well, who are those workers who are rebuilding those cities? Pilar has already told us. In many cases, in most cases, it's going to be immigrant workers, many of whom are undocumented. We know nationwide and in Southern California, the construction industry told us that it's facing severe labor shortages. There simply are not enough roofers, drywall installers, house framers, and so on. And in region after region in the United States, this problem exists. And it exists in Southern California as well. And so workers are being drawn in, many of whom are immigrants who know how to do the work and are helping our communities rebuild. They're working with homeowners, renters, and business owners to try to do the necessary environmental remediation before the rebuilding can start. And they're going to be there on the job site when the construction resumes. However, and I think this is the underlying purpose of this call, in the current political climate, in the anti-immigrant rhetoric that we heard during the presidential campaign, and what we have seen from this administration over its 3 days in office, tells us that threats of deportation are real, and they are being felt at the community level. One of the issues that's not talked about enough is the pernicious effect of this rhetoric. And what it has done is it has emboldened unscrupulous employers to use immigration-based retaliation against workers. And because of the rhetoric and the actions of this administration in Washington, D.C., those threats of immigration retaliation have particular force. Workers fear contesting wage theft. They fear contesting unsafe working conditions because we have seen for years some employers willingly using immigration-based threats as a way to undermine labor standards in the United States. I'll pause here now and stop before we turn it over to Pablo. What we have also seen, though, is that worker centers, such as those with the National Day Labor Organizing Network, have a unique role in this environment. I've described a void in labor protections that exists during moments of crisis, like what we're going through in Los Angeles at the moment. And these worker centers have become disaster recovery hubs that are sites where PPE can be delivered, where worker training can occur, where labor standards can be monitored and enforced, where relations with government enforcement agencies can be strengthened, and where as a whole, workers and their organizations like the Endelon Worker Centers, workers in those organizations can take responsibility for safeguarding workers' rights. So thank you, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Theodore. What do you see as aside from all the consequences of these pressures, the wage theft, the exposure, to toxics, etc. Do you expect this threat coming from the administration to inhibit these workers? Do you expect them to just not show up for work, or do you think they're just risk it because that's what they do?
In Florida, we saw cases after the Hurricane Ian. We saw cases where workers simply were not going to risk it. We had had similar strident rhetoric from Governor DeSantis and legislation passed within California. I think it's a bit of a signal of the chilling effect that this kind of legislation can have and the impact that it has on the construction industry to help communities rebuild. So I think there are actual real impacts to this to the rhetoric, and of course the rhetoric has been borne out by actions as we've seen on the news over the last couple of days.
Thank you. Just stay around. Let's bring in Pablo Alvarado, who's co-director of the National Day Laborers Organizing Network. Pablo, you've been on the ground with day laborers at the Pasadena Job Center near one of the big fires that created such destruction there in the Altadena area. Tell us about what the workers have been doing, what you guys have been doing for the last couple weeks.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me, Pilar, to participate in this conversation. And thank you, Nick, for all the work that we've done together for the 25 years. There are 70 day labor worker centers across the country. And every time that there is a disaster, these centers are activated to become hubs for information, as Nick was saying, but they're also an asset to the communities where these disasters happen. And oftentimes the assistance that worker centers provide gets to the impacted areas even before the so-called first responders do. We saw it after Sandy in New York, where day laborers were knocking on people's doors to bring food to people, and then it was beautiful to see people. It was beautiful to see people saying, "Thank you, you're the first ones knocking on my door." So that's what day labor worker centers do in the face of disaster, not just protecting workers and ensuring that they have the proper personal protective equipment, and they know how to identify bad employers from good employers, because the vast majority of employers out there are not, are do good. So workers are trained on a variety of things, of topics. For instance, in this worker center in Pasadena, I happen to live in the city of Pasadena. I've been very close to the fires. I've been in the area that has been impacted by the fires, and there's so much devastation. It's a devastation of biblical proportions. So very, very, very difficult situation and scenes to see in the Altadena area. So the center is a mile away from the area that has been devastated. And workers who come here, some of them used to live in that area, and they have also worked for people who lost their homes. Um, I heard so many stories of workers coming to our center, people who are members of the center coming and saying, what I have on, it's all I possess in this life. And not only that, not only my apartment is gone because the majority of them are renters, but also homeowners. Not only my apartment is gone, but the house that I clean is also gone. And that's how interconnected we are. And that is the socioeconomic fabric that keeps this country going. Without a housekeeper, without a gardener, without a day laborer, middle-class families will have it difficult to do their jobs. So we complement each other. We are each other, and we actually see it here in Pasadena. That it appears like the tables have turned in the situation here, because the center has actually become the place where families and folks who have lost their homes are coming to receive the supplies that they need, from baby formula to diapers for children and adults, food, clothing, shoes. This is the center. Every day we have about 500 cars that are coming to pick up donations. The center is serving about 1,000 people every day. It's probably the major community, the largest community operation to respond to the disasters that exist in the area. We know that the disaster has been colossal, and I think that no one expects any government, whether it's local or state government, to be prepared for such a catastrophe. And when that happens, that's when people come in. That's when humble people can lend a hand. So the workers are the volunteers, and the way it started it was very simple, because this is what we've done all over the country. But here, just right at the corner from the center, there was a tree that fell, and it was a huge tree and was blocking the street. So when the winds ended, we came together. We had a workers' assembly, and we asked the workers, what do you want to do? And it was like natural, because this is who we are, immigrants. They said, well, we know how to operate chainsaws. We know how to use machetes, to cut branches. We have the skills to do this. So let's create a fire relief brigade. So we began by removing that tree, and then they moved to the next one, to the next one, and to the next one, and to the next one. At the end of the day, we had a name. It's the Fire Relief Brigade, and we took a picture and posted it on social media, and all of a sudden you have, like, it was first hundreds, then it became thousands of volunteers coming to Pasadena. And of course, the local government has so many concerns about liabilities, and they were not taking volunteers. They were all sending them over here. So the operation has been going on for, I think today is the 14th day since the operation started, and a lot of people from all walks of life have come here to the Worker Center. And it appears that, yes, the fire destroyed so much, but it appears that, at least with the people that have come here, that the fire also burned away our differences, because we saw folks from the MAGA crowd coming in to help, and working with them hand to hand were members of the Socialist Party. The Democratic Socialists were here working with them. And what that tells you is that when a disaster, you really get to know people during a time of crisis. And what this tells you is that in this moment, humanity is above partisanship, humanity is above ideology. And the beauty of this effort is that it's immigrant workers who are spearheading, leading the effort. So the brigade, right now, as we speak, there are 15 brigades removing debris across the city. If the city is getting clean, it's not because of the infrastructure that the city has, because it has been overwhelmed by the need. It's because day laborers who have their trucks, they're coming and they're going, and we're sending volunteers to load those trucks. So it's a labor of love. And at the same time that we're doing this, people are getting trained on protecting themselves and how to use the proper personal protective equipment. Because there's so many there's so many hazards, chemical hazards in the air, millions of particles that are really terrible. I remember after 9/11 in New York, that it was day laborers who also did the cleanup, and one of the consequences of doing that was that years later they had cancer. Well, we're about to face a similar situation here. I've driven around those neighborhoods and I've seen so many workers without the protection that they need. Of course, we come and hand out what we have available, but of course, you need not just a N95 masks to get into those places. Women and men, day laborers and household workers are already going in, because as time goes by, families are coming back. Those who were evacuated are coming back, but their homes are really full of chemical hazards and a lot of ashes. It's terrible. And people are going in without the proper gear that they need to protect their health and safety. So, and again, these are immigrant workers who are doing this. And there is no way that Los Angeles can be rebuilt without the undocumented migrant labor force. It's always been essential. It was essential before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and in the aftermath of the pandemic, and now more than ever here in LA. To rebuild LA, impossible to do it without immigrant workers. So now we'll see, where the president wants to take all of this, because there's a business side of this president, and maybe because I will say that the country is used to benefit and enjoy the fruits of migrant labor, but the country hasn't been ready to accept people's humanity. And what that means for us in real terms is granting people their rights, so they're protected, so that whether it's at the workplace or when they take their children to school. Now there's fears that the ICE might show up at school, so there are families that are not sending their kids to school. This is on top of because when people think about immigrant workers, people just think, oh well, they're the ones who rebuild and whatever, and that we need the labor anyway. But people are also recovering themselves, so they're rebuilding their own lives while they help rebuild other people's lives, and that's where we are. That's exactly what's happening here in LA, right now.
Let me bring in some questions for you and Nick. Sunita, why don't you ask one of your questions? Sunita?
Hi,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you to both of you. I wanted to ask, there's this prevailing narrative that immigrant workers are taking, quote, American jobs. Could both of you please address this myth?
Sure. The construction industry, whether we're talking about the industry associations or the home builders associations, all were reporting a nationwide labor shortage of about 500,000 construction workers. 500,000. And that's before the round of hurricanes in North Carolina. It's before the fires in Los Angeles. So right now, this is before any of these disasters, and we know that in a few months we'll be back in hurricane season again. There is a demonstrable shortage of construction workers. And we also know that if you look at the industries where undocumented immigrants are most likely to be employed, I believe construction is at the top. So put these two things together and you can see that we have a real need for construction workers in this country, and we have a real need, especially in disaster recovery zones.
Thank you. Pablo?
Pablo, you have anything to say?
No, I think Nick responded it
Thank you.
right.
Yeah, pretty clear. Okay, great. There's other questions here. Do you both think that this, I mean, you have described, Pablo, a group, a city coming together, people coming together in this disaster, and yet we have a political situation, we have a division in the country, we have public opinions favoring deportations at this point in time. And do you both feel that if people understand the stakes here after disasters, for example, in LA or in other places, could this help change public attitudes?
I hope efforts that we're engaged in result in changing hearts and minds. And I'm not sure about that, but what I am certain of is that when the day labor volunteers, the brigades here, went to remove the branches from driveways that were blocking people's access, they were not asking whether the owner of that home was a Republican or a Democrat or a friend or a foe. They weren't. So now I don't know what's in people's hearts. Hopefully, this act of love, kindness, and solidarity from the very same people that are being persecuted have some sort of impact in people's hearts and minds. I would hope so. I still have faith in humanity in the face of this craziness that we're living.
Nick, anything you want to add? Okay. All right. I want to bring in Jenny Murray, who's President and Chief Executive Officer at the National Immigration Forum. Hi, Jenny. Now that you've seen the executive orders and the actions happening from the administration, please tell us what you think it's going to be like for the construction industry to be able to get the workers it needs to rebuild LA and any other climate disaster that comes down the pike.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for Nick and Pablo's comments. I agree that this is an extremely difficult time for workers and American employers alike. The construction industry is just one of the most constricted, but the entire labor force is very constricted. Just a quick top line on the kind of the macro economics of our tight labor market. We right now have the lowest birth rate we've ever had as a nation. We have 8 to 10 million open jobs every single month, and that's been 3 or 4 years running nonstop. And then the lowest unemployment we've ever had. Right. We also have a lot of the industry depending on foreign-born talent, just like healthcare, agriculture, and a number of other industries. Construction is heavily dependent on foreign-born labor, and because of, as Nick talked through, the misclassification of the industry overall, there's a lot of folks who do work through contract and vendor work, and we know that there's a lot of undocumented workers that we depend on in this industry, and so it will, for all the wonderful things that Pablo and Nick said, will be very difficult for this industry to be able to not only find, but also have the trust of these workers to be able to bring them to LA, because it won't just happen in California alone. I mean, we know that 40% of the workforce is of the construction industry in California is foreign born. But we will have to, and I'm a Californian, originally a Southern Californian myself, and we will have to depend on many, many states and even neighboring countries, right, potentially to bring in the talent that we need to rebuild from this disaster. But folks are going to be too afraid, and we've had this comment already in the conversation, they're going to be too afraid to show up for these jobs. So the labor market is very tight, and there's a lot of reasons why we should worry about the opportunity to rebuild. We also should talk about the fact that the Olympics is right on the heels of all of this, and the industry it would need to be growing and robustly populating at this point, even if we didn't have wildfires, just to be able to try to meet that need. And overall, our immigration system, of course, is not meeting that need because it's overall our visa categories and our pathways for those that are here and contributing do not allow for workers to thrive in the system and for us to have enough workers to thrive. So a lot of issues there, and it would be short-sighted if I didn't mention the fact that even as of last night, we saw breaking news that we might also be potentially losing up to 1.4 million temporary authorized workers from the labor market with the parole, with the DHS memo saying that now temporarily paroled individuals who came through the previous administration might also now lose that status and be eligible for deportation. So Pablo and Nick very well covered our very overarching concern, of course, about the existing undocumented population that is supplying key workers, and we want to think about their safety and participation in the fear that is running through that community. But I'm also now very worried with an expanded sense of the folks that will be losing authorization and also hurting our economy overall as well, and also the fear, of course, and the separation of families that I'm deeply worried about. So Pilar, I hope that helps, and I'm also happy, if it's okay with you, I'd love to also jump in a little bit about what I think about the sort of the political tone and the opportunity, because I thought that last question that I think Pablo and Nick weighed in on is, what's the opportunity there for, do we think this will change hearts and minds? I would love to share that we do a lot of polling consistently with the Bullfinch group, and even as recent as December. So the Bullfinch group does polling with registered voters. They self-select into the polling, they self-identify. And even as recent as December, those who self-identified as Republicans, conservatives, and evangelicals all said that 75% of them, or actually I think it was 76%, wanted deportations only to be focused on violent criminals and not those that are here and contributing. So what we know, if you look at the numbers then and you dice that out, you will know that even those who voted for Trump and even those Democrats who said that they have a problem with the existing immigration challenges, so a lot of the country said that, even if we look at that, we will see that what they meant by that was that they want to make sure that the narrative about violent criminals is something that the country continues to have security actions regarding, and not those that are here and contributing, not immigration related crimes in any way, if you will, if you're using that. That's a terminology that folks have been using, of course, on the anti side. So that's why I use that. And also family separation and all of these horrific continued acts would not be something that American voters support. And so definitely, I believe that whether it's evangelical leaders, business leaders, law enforcement leaders, or national security experts, all of whom we get to work with at the forum. I definitely believe that when we start to see, and we have seen a few raids, there was a raid yesterday, I think in New Jersey, that potentially swept up a US citizen veteran and a couple other, when we start to see some of this overreach and start to see folks being prioritized who are here and contributing and not violent criminals or not eligible for deportation, I think we'll start to see the American voters say, this is not what I signed up for. This was not a blank check, if you will. And I do think we're already starting to see many faith leaders and national security experts weighing in. So I wanted to share that. I also think that there's a lot of things that we need to pay attention to outside of the administration. So there's a lot of distraction right now. The administration, the executive orders are, of course, moving very quickly and causing my team and all of our teams to jump in and look to be very active and supportive. However, Congress can do a whole lot to stave this off. Of course, the court system will as well. But Congress has a lot of really good bipartisan solutions that can help to both secure the border and move past this sort of moment of the border conversation, sort of secure the border, make sure that the process is orderly, but also prioritize American companies, workers' rights, and also make sure our economy has what it needs to thrive and treat people humanely. We can do all of that together. There's many solutions that are right now with Congress that are bipartisan and pragmatic. And so we don't want to lose our focus on that. We want to make sure, and those are permanent fixes, right? And so if we can go ahead now and also advocate while we're putting up our offense and defense and getting out our information to protect individuals, we of course also want to make sure we turn our focus onto the lasting change that Congress can bring about.
Thank you, Jenny. There is a question in the chat from Henrietta Burrows that I think it's relevant to what you're saying. Henrietta, you want to ask your question about employers?
Oh, yes. Do you see any movement on the part of employers to change the way immigrant workers are being treated? Are they petitioning, given the shortage of laborers at this point, to use those who are undocumented?
So there's a lot in that question, Henrietta, and if I could take it into a couple parts. So one, do I see employers, I think you're asking, do I see employers being involved and working in any way? So yes, employers are definitely extremely worried about kind of those macroeconomic pieces that I shared off the top. So they're very worried about their current workforce, both their actual personnel, but retaining the workers that they have. We could go on and on and on about even the competition within the construction industry, right? That there's just already, the numbers are so lean. Folks are competing even for workers in that setting. But beyond that, employers are definitely very worried about their existing employees and worker numbers, but also future flows of workers, and very nervous to see that they're having lack of access to folks and that they might lose workers in this tight labor market. And so that's definitely been a heavy advocacy push, I would say, with business the last several months, whether that's private or public, we could all weigh in on how that's being done, but definitely there's a lot of employers weighing in on, everything from workplace raids to having access to workers. And so there's definitely that going on. I think if I understand the second part of your question, did you mean, are they advocating for new pathways so folks can
Exactly.
Yes, absolutely. Well, yes, and that's never stopped, right? I've been doing this over 20 years, and that's been the advocacy of businesses. How can we make sure these 11 million folks who already are here and contributing can convert and have a pathway that allows them to be to be safe and secure. They are continuing that, but I think that there are more creative solutions probably than ever before. There, up until yesterday, there was a lot of work to see, can we convert asylum seekers who are here now waiting for their appointment 4 to 5 years? Can we go ahead and convert them to a more permanent work status, something more secure? Of course, this parole announcement last night really hurts that effort, but they're not going to stop advocating for that. That's definitely something that all of business is aligned on.
Thank you, Jenny. I want to bring in Anabela from Chirla, Anabela Bastida, who works with the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights in Los Angeles. Anabela, you have been assisting those affected by the fires. What can you tell us about the sense that people have about the current situation, and what are the threats to these workers?
First, I just wanted to say thank you, Pilar, for bringing us all together. I wanted to also say thank you to Pablo for the amazing work that he's doing. Nick, Jenny, thank you so much for all your efforts, and to all people that are listening, thank you for uplifting our message and for uplifting what is happening in our community. So Chirla, we are an organization that has been here for almost 4 years. Our mission is to achieve a just society fully inclusive of immigrants, and we are a membership-based organization. We have over 52,000 members. The vast majority are here in LA County, and most of our work for many years has been advocating for the immigrant community, organizing, and as well providing support. During this specific time, what we have been doing is being on the field, listening to the stories, comforting them, connecting them to different services, to different opportunities, but more than anything, hearing from them what they need. So I just wanted, similar to what Pablo described, the stories that we are hearing are really heartbreaking. Whether there is like a older lady that has been here for 30 years or more, serving as domestic worker, and that now lose everything as their property where they live it was totally destroyed, or whether that lady was working with someone else and now they don't have a job where they can continue getting their living. So I just wanted to also share with you that listening to the stories, we are just trying to as well connect immigrants, undocumented community to different services, but also trying to address and look for solutions and trying to look for things in which we can respond at this moment and be of support. So particularly, I have been seeing, or I have been hearing from many families that they lose, including their identifications. For instance, they lose their passport, they lose their matrículas consulares, and it's complicated for them to even pay for those documents. So what we have been doing is that we are coordinating in partnership with the Mexican consulate, trying to convey all those people that we encounter and provide with their contact information so they can follow up. But also I wanted to also share with you that other things that we are particularly doing is as relates to activate our iRelief program. So our iRelief program is a program that connects immigrants to cash and food assistance as well as social services. And we found this program in 2020 in response to the pandemic. And through the years, we have been able to support thousands of families. So with the wildfires, what we did is that we activated our program once more. And we start like asking for donations, and the generosity of our community, the support that we are receiving is paying off. So right now what we are doing is particularly providing with cash assistance to those families that are not eligible for FEMA, and that even if they may be eligible, that they don't want to really provide with their information. We have, as you know, undocumented people may be able to qualify for FEMA if they have like minors in their families. But what they have been sharing, for instance, yesterday, one family said, I'm not going to risk in providing my information to the government when I'm going to put my my livelihood in jeopardy. So we are trying to help particularly domestic workers. We are helping roofers. We are helping street vendors and those that are the most affected. Those families, as I mentioned, that do not qualify for any kind of financial support. And in this particular moment, one of the things that also I appreciate is the solidarity of the community, the solidarity of many people that wanted to help. And thanks to that is that we have been able to secure some donations, whether that's Pampers for families affected, whether that's water and other things. But also we were able to secure a donation from a small business in Seattle, Washington, and they were able to provide us with 400,000 K95 masks. And what we did is that with the organizers and with our different volunteers, we ensembled a large group, and we were able to distribute those masks to different centers, to different organizations. But also, we are providing those masks in the most affected areas. I wanted to also share with you something that really is also impacting us, and I wanted to as well address the fact that what is happening not just for people that is really afraid, not as it was just described here, that we are helping in our office, but also we are trying to go to shelters and other locations. But what we have been seeing is that in shelters, in reality, not many members of the community are showing up. They are afraid if you go to those locations, you will see FEMA and you will see all those operations, and many people is not even showing to that location. But in addition to that, what was just described, the undocumented population is really afraid of what is happening. We have been seeing, as you know, with ICE in Bakersfield and other areas. But for instance, yesterday, knowing that there has been some agents in LA County and other regions, you can sense the fear that right now is in our community. For many weeks, we have been trying to prepare with what is in our capacity, and we have been able to do some partnerships with LAUSD and with churches and with other entities, and we have been able to provide with almost 150 trainings on Know Your Rights, but also train the trainers. And there is a lot of demands in terms of us providing with that support. But what we are doing is trying to as well convey the message that things are happening, that we need to be prepared, but at the same time have that sense that we cannot be paralyzed, and we cannot continue not going to school, not going to hospitals, and not getting the assistance that we need. So what we also have been activating, and we are receiving many calls from the community, is particularly in our Cheerless immigrant line. And through that, we provide as well with some of the services that we are providing, but also we try to refer people to other agencies. But right now, at this moment, particularly the priority is to try to convey the message to the community that we are not alone, that there are many organizations, many entities that are with us. We here at Chirla are leading our rapid response network. And in this rapid response network, we are so blessed to come with a group of attorneys. We are blessed to come with a group of media and with other partners that we are very active in terms of reporting anything that is happening, because we wanted to be prepared, but at the same time, we wanted to provide our community with that sense that we will be fighting, we will be advocating, and united. I am really confident that we will continue moving forward.
Thank you, Nabela. Thank you so much for all that Shirla is doing out there in the community. So let's go around the panel, and let's ask each of you to state for us, what do you think what can we do from the ethnic media point of view? What can we do as journalists to help in this moment that we face this political situation and we face these natural disasters that are impacting our communities? It seems like a catch-22. Nick, what do you think we should be focusing
on? Well, I think something that came up in a question that Sunita raised and Annabella has mentioned as well, which is the way in which immigrants are being discouraged from pursuing basic services, such as going to the hospital and so on. You know, when we did our survey in 2017, after Hurricane Harvey in Houston. We had a situation there where Customs and Border Patrol and ICE both issued a memo saying they would not enforce immigration laws if people went to a shelter. This was backed up by statement by a press release from Mayor Sylvester and from Governor Abbott. So you had the federal government, the state government, and the local government all declaring that the most important thing here is to prevent the loss of life, and we will not enforce immigration laws if people want to go to the shelters. And still, our survey showed that workers stayed away from those shelters because they didn't believe it. Now, the immigration rhetoric is so much more elevated today. And as Annabella was mentioning, it's and Pablo as well, discouraging people from taking kids to school, discouraging people from going to hospitals. So I think to uncover this is part of the attrition strategy. The idea that if you make life sufficiently miserable for immigrants, they will self-deport. And so I think immigrants across the nationalities and across, the world that have come here are facing this very problem. And I think ethnic media could try to lift up the human costs of this divisive rhetoric that we're dealing with.
Pablo?
Yes, a few things that I would advise. The first one is not to fall into that trap that this administration wants to go only after the so-called violent criminal. It's a lie. It's exactly what President Obama did when he used the phrase felons, not families. Turns out that the vast majority of people that he deported did not represent any threat to public safety. So please don't fall into that trap as a first advice. The second advice that I would provide here is tell the story of who we are, who immigrants are, but not from an angle of pity. In a good day, when you turn the TV and you have MSNBC on, and this isn't a good day, you will hear liberals telling, oh, poor immigrants, poor refugees, and if you turn on Fox News, all you see hatred. So immigrants have been in the middle of these two sentiments, pity and scorn. And we're strong people. The example that the day laborers are showing here in Pasadena tells you otherwise. And guess what? Yeah, there is fear, but people are still gonna go to work. What's gonna happen is that they're gonna push farther into the margins, and their rights are gonna be violated. But people are gonna stay here. People are going nowhere. They're just gonna hide more. Mm-hmm. So the second advice is tell the story from the angle of strength of who we are as an immigrant community. In fact, I would say that migrants are the beating heart of this country in this moment. The third advice that I would suggest, it's that because right now there is this narrative that comes from the Beltway and Beltway from Democrats and also some of the so-called immigrant rights organizations in the Beltway, who are telling people that the reason why the Democrats lost the election is because organizations like ours, like organizations like this worker center that's doing all of this beautiful work, that we call for radical demands, not true. Asking the government not to deport people is not a radical demand. So don't fall into that trap. Don't blame organizations, because that's exactly what's coming out of Washington, D.C. And when it comes down to the border, whenever politicians talk to you about a secure border, what they're telling you essentially is that they want to make the border more dangerous, more risky, more deadly. And that's a partisan, effort. Indeed, I would say that there's a bipartisan war on immigrants in this moment. Please tell the truth.
Jenny?
Thank you. Yeah, I would highlight a few different things. I would say that, as a reminder, so many folks have lots of agency that are reading your outlets, right? So we have a lot of American voters. We have just a lot of leaders that rely on your reporting and reminding them of their agency, and also reminding them of where the hope can still lie. So we do expect that many of the executive orders will continue to be held up in the judicial system for very good reason. We've already seen a couple of actions, but we do think that there will be many more, right? And that there is likely overreach of power, which is what the courts will likely find. And so there's that. We do have, pointing you back to sort of my comments earlier, we do have hope in Congress. They can move permanent solutions that help to solidify so many folks, and create, crucial protections and stabilize the economy. We also do really believe that there are so many incredible welcomers out there. It would be great to see the stories of those who provide welcome. It's great, of course, to see first-person stories of immigrants and newcomers who are on the hard, very much on the hard part of this story and are being left out and behind and are in fear. Don't stop doing that, please. But also bringing the stories of welcome. Who is their pastor who's also standing alongside them? Who is that local law enforcement individual who has stood up and said, we don't want to do immigration enforcement in our state? And there's been so many, even in very conservative places. What are those stories? It'd be really great to get those stories out, especially also to make sure people do, to Nick and Pablo's point, do sense the calm and sense the fact that this is not the majority of Americans who feel this way, because it is the truth. It's not the majority of Americans, and polling after polling shows us that. So really pointing to those stories, and also the hope that we have in the other checks and balances in our system is really important. And the fact that Republicans very much so, some of them, of course, are seen to be leading the way in some of the difficult things here, but there are a number of them that are willing to continue to craft bipartisan solutions, and we need to leave the door open to that.
Thank you so much. Annabella, to close, very short, please.
I just wanted to say that as immigrant myself, as someone that lives in mixed status family, I wanted to say that we have been here for many years. We love this country with all our heart. We are going to resist, and we are going to stay.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you for joining us. I know this is a very difficult week for all of you. You've been having so much work and so many demands on you, but thank you for joining us, and thank you to the Ethnic Media for being with us today. Sandy, do you want to say anything to close?
No, I'm just inspired by the comments. Anything I say is just a huge thank you.
All right, thank you. Have a good weekend, everyone.